The Second World War and the Cold War. Isolationism, Neutrality Act, 1935. Gradual shift towards involvement. Cash and carry, destroyer deal, Lend-Lease Act, repealed Neutrality Act. Relations with Japan, Japanese fears concerning resources. Pearl Harbor, U.S. enters war. The Home Front, some important wartime agencies. War Production Board, organized and coordinated industries to make quick, efficient transitions into production of war materials. No consumer autos were built during war. Office of War Information, responsible for maintaining morale, positive propaganda. Office of Price Administration, set prices, rationed goods, fought inflation and black market, assured military needs were met. War Labor Board, settled disputes between business and labor, avoided strikes and maintained morale. Fair Employment Practice Committee, prevented employer discrimination against workers, foundation for the civil rights movement of the 1950s. Conduct of war, two-front war of the U.S., Europe first. World War II allies included Great Britain, Free France, and the USSR, and Nationalist China. Conferences, Casablanca, Cairo, Tehran, Planned War Strategy, Yalta, 1945, Planned Post-War Strategies. Post-war period, Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, GI Bill. The United Nations organization favored big winners. The Cold War. The Truman Doctrine, pledged aid to Greece and Turkey. Containment policy, intended to keep communism within its original borders. Marshall Plan, offered recovery assistance to all European countries. Communist countries declined. Berlin Blockade, Soviets block land access U.S. responds by air. NATO, designed to block or contain communists, especially Soviet expansion, ignored George Washington's advice against permanent alliances. Communist victory in China, nationalists flee to Taiwan, government there recognized as China by the United States and the UN until Nixon. Korean War, communist North Korea attacks South Korea, the UN responds. Armistice terms restore status quo. SEATO, Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, is the Pacific equivalent to NATO. Hungarian Revolt, Soviets crush Hungarian Revolution. Aswan Dam, Soviets assist Egypt in building the dam. U.S. and Britain offered first, but withdrew the offer. Suez Canal seizure, Egypt takes control, France, Britain, and Israel invade. U.S. and Soviets stop them. Superpower diplomacy at work. Eisenhower Doctrine, offers aid to Middle Eastern countries who feel threatened by communism. U-2 incident, U.S. spy plane shot down over Soviet territory. Independence of African nations, civil wars break out all over. Sputnik, 1957. Cuban Revolution, Castro takes over, announces communist regime, relations with the U.S. deteriorate. Bay of Pigs, Cuban refugees backed by the United States fail to overthrow Castro. Berlin Wall, Soviets seal off East Berlin with physical wall. Cuban Missile Crisis. Soviets attempt to place missiles in Cuba. The U.S. blockades. France, Dien Bien Phu, and our involvement in Vietnam. Anti-war demonstrations and Jane Fonda. The Hotline. Direct link between U.S. and USSR intended to divert nuclear disaster. First used during Six-Day War. President Kennedy assassinated. Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Allowed only underground testing. Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights. Outer Space Treaty. Banned the military bases, weapons, and weapons tests in outer space. Lunar Landing, 1969. Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Banned the spread of nuclear weapons among signatory nations. 1969. Nixon's visit to China. Communist China had already become the UN member. Now, President Nixon's visit opened new friendly relations with this huge nation. Détente, 1972. President Nixon visited Moscow and signed several agreements, including the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. The Cold War eased. The Reagan Revolution. The West wins the Cold War. The Gorbachev influence. The INF Treaty. 1980 election. Issues, debates, hostage crisis. Reagan and communism. Evil empire. Nicaragua. Latin America. Grenada. 1988 election. Candidates and issues. Bush policies. Desert Storm and Middle East policy. Economics. Civil rights.